Hey guys, I've got a bit of a fun one tonight. This isn't a promoted video or anything of that nature. This is just a client that I'm working for, but if you've ever been to LazyOne.com, they do really fun designs of especially their pajama line, and that's who this is for. So anyway, if you check out their site, they do a lot of neat stuff, and I do occasional retouch work for them. So this is not sponsored or anything, just wanting to show them some love as they have so generously shown me and supporting me in what I do. So the client need on this one is that it was photographed in-house and they did a really good job, but what they're looking for now is they want to use it as more of a portrait style picture, and the two children are too far apart. So my objective is to move this guy over to the left, maybe lining up the claws of the paws with this window here, this window element in the background. So here we go. First thing I'm going to do is probably just do a selection of all of this side. I'll use the marquee tool because it's pretty straightforward. I'll grab all of that, and then I'll press Ctrl J, and that'll duplicate it into its own layer. So now I have a loose layer with everything in the right side. So a little trick I like to do, you can set it to difference if you want, and try to line things up that way. I've never liked doing it that way. I tend to just leave it on normal blending mode and then set the opacity to about half. And then I can kind of move things in the way I want them in. So Control Plus to zoom in. I just want to make sure that I've got these horizon lines lined up so that I save myself some work toward the end. So I'll press V for move, and then I'll just nudge this down so that it lines up perfectly or near perfectly, just using my arrow keys. So that's pretty well done it. Yeah, I like that. So now that we're lined up and we've moved the guy in there, we're going to remove all the background elements that keep us from selling this illusion. So I'll raise my opacity back up. And for starters, let's use a quick cheat. I'm going to grab my normal brush. I'm going to make it fairly big and fairly soft using Shift bracket. Then I'm going to come down here to the layers palette. We've got this little Japanese flag looking thing. That's our layer mask button. So I can add a layer mask onto this. And with this brush nice and big and set to black, I'm going to just paint loosely around these elements to try and blend them together. I'm going to fudge these blankets just a little bit, like that. Yeah. And I'm not too concerned. I know that they're trying to do it as a portrait style picture, so I could take the time to replace all of these pillows and things so that they're in their original position. I don't think that's going to matter so much because I know what they're going for with this. So it doesn't make sense to take that extra time for the client unless it's something that they're asking me for. So I'm going to ignore the fact that this has a double portrait now, the shelving and everything. So I'll go in here, use the bracket key to make my brush a little smaller, and then we're just going to trace along here and right there. Okay, so that's blending there. And then we're going to introduce this fake window element. Just like that. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. We'll trace along here. Oh, I'm going to have to, okay, we'll introduce the shadow element and then maybe not bring that line over. Smaller brush, just kind of trace along there and fudge that edge. Okay. About like that. Okay, now I want to realign it ever so slightly. Yeah, there we go. Okay, looking pretty good. I like it. And zoom out, and wow, this might be a short video. Sorry, guys. I'm gonna go over this edge right here. And let's put a really drastic blend on this brush, bring it down to there, and then bring those claw elements back in. Maybe I'll just smudge them. I like smudging. I like to smudge the mask because then you can kind of treat it like a painterly thing. Let's see, turn that on and off. Okay, still got some more smudging to do. Smudge those claws into existence. About like that. Oh, we can give it a little bit more. Okay, so now I've introduced a little bit of those soft elements. You can see how the claws are not quite as dark as they need to be, and that's because of the soft brush. So now I'll make my brush much smaller and much more firm. I'll just soften it by 1 or 2 degrees, and then I will paint along here so that there's no backdrop being introduced, and go out onto those claw tips. Okay, now I'm going to zoom out and just see if there's anything that bothers me about the picture. The blanket elements look okay. It's not too bad. I may actually just leave it there. So yeah, that was an incredibly short video, but let me show off one more trick that I often use for LazyOne. I'm going to hit save on this right now, and then I'll play around. Often it becomes important to get these little details. You can see that this is a very furry piece of merchandise, and because of this being a bit of an action pose, we've got some motion on this that we might not ordinarily have, but let's treat it as though it's not, or that we need to preserve some sort of detailing. So if you right click on a mask after you've kind of started on it, there are a lot of really great tools built into Photoshop. So right now I've got it set on black because a lot of what I do works that way, but I'm going to set this to be on layers, and then it looks the way it'll appear in your final. So you can use edge detection, which can be pretty helpful, but what I tend to use is this brush right here, and just paint along any edge where there is going to be a transition, and Photoshop will go and compare these light pixels of the wall and the dark pixels of the fur, and will do a blend. Now right there I've run into trouble. That's a really bad example, Adam. Let's go along here, mostly because I want to remove this glint element. It just appears kind of awkward to me. And we'll remove this one as well. Or, well, maybe not remove it completely, but we'll tone it down. We'll see what we're in the mood for. But I'll paint along here. Yeah, that's fine. It's as discreet as it ought to be. And click OK, it'll apply our changes. Alright, so one more change I'm going to do. Again, I apologize. I thought that there might be something more to this photo, but I was just grateful to have something to make a video on today. I was in the mood for this. So let's make a new layer. And I like to be very good in naming things, so I'll just call this window glint removal. Alright, so I'll grab the reliable clone stamper tool, and I always set my clone to use current and below rather than just current or all layers. That way, now that it's positioned above these other things, it will borrow from anything that it sees and paint it into this layer. It's very helpful. So I'll do this, and if it ends up being kind of ugly, I can always switch and try using the healer, but I like grabbing the stamper first if I can get away with it. So let's alt-click right here where we've got a good transition. Make our brush a little bigger. And I'll just start painting along here, right up to that line, like that. And now, because I want to transition this, I'm going to paint a little higher, maybe a little higher than I should. I'll just make a nice transition right there. Okay, and it started borrowing from that top, which causes me a bit of trouble. So now that I've done that, if I alt-click on this eyeball, I can see just what I've created. So I just created a panel that covers up the glint, but it's too much. We don't like it as it is. So just for fun, let's add a mask to that, and we'll do the same thing. We'll make a nice big brush and make it pretty soft and paint out that transition right there. So I'm just going to go right along there and hide that transition. Now, because this ought to appear as a window, I want to reintroduce some of the glint that was originally there. So I'll select the entire layer, and as we will recall, this is a layer that just hides the glint. So if I make it less of a hider, then the glint can show through. So I'll lower its opacity and just let just a little bit of that shiny come through. Oh, something. I don't want it to look like an accident. Let's control minus out a couple phases and make sure that whatever we do looks natural. Let's bring it. I just want it very subtle. There we go, right about there. So 74% before, after. It keeps my eye from going to it, and maybe it's, and I run into this trouble a lot where I stare at an image too long and start to notice the wrong things. I want my eye to be drawn to these paws, or at least where they join. You've got this complex N or W shape that kind of draws the eye in that way. The knees point to each other, so your eyes could go there as well, but really the focal point ought to come up here just a little bit, and the glint is just a little too strong. So I think if I subdue it to right about there, it's looking better. So because this image will be used by other people, I'm going to mark it. So I'll put a guideline in here so that anyone who uses it will understand that they're not to use that portion, and that way we avoid being destructive as well. I'm going to put another one because we have just a couple pixels right here that didn't match up, and I'll drop a line in there, and that way they'll know that that's the place to crop. Anyway, super short video, but I was really in the mood to do it, and sometimes you just gotta get things out of your system. So if I hold down Alt and click on the background, we can see the complete before and after. And yeah, hopefully when they use this, it'll be good for them. This is a common ratio that they use on their website, and that's a pretty good fit for that. So all in all, I'm pleased. It was fast and easy, and I definitely brought this project in under budget. So I hope that you found this relaxing. I experimented a little bit, and the spring in my mouse is going, and I probably ought to replace it. So if the clicking noises were too loud, hopefully that'll be addressed later. This mouse just needs to go. It's been around too long, and I need to get another one. So anyway, hope you relaxed to this, and I'll see you next time.